Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm Ed O'Keefe in this morning for Margaret Brennan. We turn now to the FBI search at former President Trump's Florida resort. Ohio Congressman Mike Turner is the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, and he joins us this morning from Dayton, Ohio. Congressman, great to have you with us. Thank you for being here. This past week, a Florida federal judge asked the Justice Department to prepare a redacted version of the affidavit that set off the FBI operation at the former president's home, signaling he may be willing to release it as early as this coming week. But affidavits aren't usually made public during an investigation so as to not impede the investigation. I'm curious, what level of disclosure would satisfy the demand for the release of the affidavit, in your view?
Well, this is very revealing because the court has already made a ruling that they believe, and remember, the court knows what's in the affidavit, that portions of the affidavit can be released to the public. Now, what's important about this affidavit is it will give us the information to understand how did the FBI justify raiding Mar-a-Lago and spending 9 hours in the president's house. When we know the former president's home, they had other options besides just raiding the house. They could have gone and asked for the subpoena to be enforced. And the mystery sort of here deepens because we know Attorney General Garland himself has taken responsibility, said he approved it. And the American public want the Attorney General focused on issues like human and drug smuggling at the border. They were Chinese espionage, out of control crime in our cities. But if you're going to turn to this, if you're going to turn to the former president and Mar-a-Lago, they want to make certain that this is to the highest level. There's an imminent national security threat. And this affidavit will tell us, did they even allege so? Because in their document trying to keep the affidavit sealed, they didn't even allege that there was a national security threat here.
We should point out there's a poll out this morning at another news organization that finds almost 6 in 10 Americans actually support continuing this investigation. So while there may be other big issues, there's certainly wide public interest in this one. You're an attorney, though. Why would releasing any information in this affidavit make sense and assure the former president not only a fair investigation by the Justice Department, but potentially, if it gets to that, a fair trial?
Well, I think, and you're citing polls, and there are lots of polls out there, by the way. The polls also indicate that people want to make certain that if this is an imminent national security threat, that it's pursued, but also they want to make certain that you don't have abuse of discretion here. And what our concern is from our committee is there's an allegation of classified documents that falls within our jurisdiction, and show us what you found, because the affidavit's going to have them tell publicly now what they told the court they were going to go find. Show us what you found. It certainly won't affect the investigation. We deal with classified documents and information all the time. Show us what it is that you went into the president's residence, spent 9 hours at former President Trump's residence. What is it that was at an imminent national security threat that you didn't just go to court and ask the court to order that the documents be delivered to them? Why did they spend and just think of the resources of 30 agents that spent 9 hours in the preparation for that, when we have real imminent national security threats like Chinese espionage, the border, things that are going on in Ukraine. To take these resources and apply them here, certainly the American public wants to make certain this is not an abuse of discretion.
Well, I'm curious, since you're a member of the Intelligence Committee, what use could a former president have for classified or top secret information once he's left office? Why bring it home with him to Florida?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask him, but certainly we all know that every former president has access to their documents. It's how they write their memoirs. They don't have great recall of everything that's occurred in their administration, and we don't know that they're classified. We know, according to the FBI documents, that they were identified as marked classified. You have, of course, the former president saying that he declassified them themselves. But I think what's important here about this abuse of discretion, we have evidence of the FBI abusing that discretion and of misconduct on behalf of the FBI. The FBI, we had an attorney for the FBI that actually was convicted of doctoring an email to obtain a warrant against Trump. There's Trump's organization. You have the FBI using the Russia dossier, which has been proven to be debunked as evidence under a warrant that they submitted, all of which CBS has reported, and I have them up on my website, your own stories of these abuses of discretion. And the other question that we have is just recently, there was a raid on Project Veritas, which is a news organization to supposedly retrieve President Biden's daughter's diary. Now, that's not certainly an imminent national security threat. It might be embarrassing to the president, but it's not something you'd see them do for an ordinary citizen. So there are real questions as what is the FBI doing here? it's the rank and file FBI agents. Everybody agrees. We support them. We have great faith in them. But the leadership of the FBI, when they undertake a raid against the current president's political rival, you have to ask these questions.
Real quick, are you aware of any standing order from President Trump that he might have had a standing order to declassify documents he took from the Oval Office to the White House residence while he was in office?
I have never served in the White House. I would never have any knowledge of anything that occurred at the White House.
Okay, so the Intelligence Committee wouldn't know whether the president had a standing order.
Whether Biden does, whether anybody does, what they're declassifying. In fact, we weren't even notified when President Biden declassified all the information concerning the hunt for Zawahiri. And I was very surprised, the detail that they made public there, very concerning as to how it might inform al-Qaeda and future people that we're trying to target. I had no advanced knowledge or notice when they did that.
Okay, 2 quick questions for you on the future. You want to be the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee next year?
Well, I think that certainly my work on the Intelligence Committee is about national security and focusing on national security, and that's going to continue to be my focus.
Give us a sense then of what you would investigate if you were head of the Intelligence Committee and Republicans take control of the House.
As I said from the beginning, is what I think we want Attorney General Garland to be focusing on instead of Mar-a-Lago is Chinese espionage, certainly furthering how do we assist Ukraine in fighting Russia aggression, looking at ways that we look at what's going on at the border with human and drug smuggling and how it's affecting our families. And of course, there's always the issue of the spiraling crime that's occurring in our cities, and how can we impact that? How can we ensure that we have the right tools and information about any foreign influence that might be impacting that?
And as a Republican in Ohio, what does J.D. Vance, who in some polls is trailing right now, have to do to win that Senate race and hold the seat for Republicans?
Yeah, he has to make the case, and I think he's doing that. He's campaigning very hard, and you should have him on.
We'd love to. In fact, we've asked, and so far we haven't heard back. But if he's listening, J.D. Vance, we'd love to have you. Mike Turner, we loved having you.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon here in Washington, and we'll be back in a moment. Now, for a more detailed look at all of the legal problems swirling around former President Donald Trump, we're joined by Ricky Klieman, criminal defense lawyer and a CBS News legal analyst. And here in Washington, David Laufman, the former chief of the Justice Department's Counterintelligence and Export Control Section. Great to have both of you with us. David, I want to begin with you. You're the former head of the division of the Justice Department that's now led by a guy named Jay Bratt, who argued in court this week regarding the potential release of this affidavit that it may, quote, chill future cooperation by witnesses whose assistance may be sought as this investigation progresses, as well as in other high-profile investigations. Do you agree with his assessment?
Based on my experience at the Department of Justice, that's absolutely correct, especially in the early stages of an investigation. The Justice Department and the FBI want to do everything they can to protect the integrity and confidential law enforcement actions that are being taken.
You have any sense then, do you expect he's going to release at least part of this, a redacted version?
I think the Justice Department knows it has to come back to the court with a reasonable proposal. The judge signaled pretty clearly that he wants to release some facets of this affidavit, and I think the Department and the FBI are now trying to come to grips with what they can live with regard to public disclosures. And there are some portions of the affidavit that I think they'll be willing to make public.
You just heard Congressman Turner of Ohio talking about the possibility of the Intelligence Committee getting read into the details of this at some point. There is bipartisan agreement that they've got to hear something from the Justice Department. It's just a question of when and what exactly and how much. But in your view, is there a requirement for the Justice Department and FBI to do that at all?
I mean, there's no requirement. Look, I mean, there are sometimes classic collisions between coordinate branches of government. It does seem to be premature for Congress to be sticking its nose into an ongoing criminal investigation. That's what this is. And just because it implicates classified information, to me, doesn't seem to give a platform for the House Intelligence Committee to intrude at this time.
Because it could unspool in a way where the information you share with them is leaked, and then the investigation's compromised. His ability to have a fair trial would be compromised.
Right. I think they're trying to create a kind of a carnival atmosphere under the patina of the exercise of Congress's constitutional authority to conduct investigations.
Ricky, to you, Alan Weisselberg, the former longtime chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, this past week pleaded guilty to 15 counts of fraud and tax evasion as part of the scheme to receive more than $1.7 million in off-the-books perks and compensation from the Trump Organization. Important to point out, the former president hasn't been charged as part of this civil case. But based on what you know about this case, what we've seen so far, is there any legal risk at this point to a member of the Trump family?
There is hardly any legal risk because of the fact that the plea of Alan Weisselberg is against the Trump Organization, which really means the Trump Corporation and the Trump Payroll Corporation. It had to do with the fact that he received perks to, as you say, $1.7 million over a period of years. The plea bargain seems abundantly clear. He is testifying against entities, not people.
And there's been so much focus in the past 2 weeks on the Mar-a-Lago operation, this Weisselberg guilty plea this past week, but I know you believe that it's what's going down in Georgia that is potentially most legally risky for the former president, correct?
There is no doubt in my mind that the most risk to the former president is, in fact, the Georgia investigation. And one of the reasons I say that is because it has intensified in terms of the number of witnesses that the district attorney is calling before this special investigative grand jury, but also the fact that should not be overlooked is that Donald Trump has hired one of the best criminal defense lawyers in the country in the person of Drew Findling. Drew Findling was a past president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. He is based in Atlanta. He knows how to work within the system ethically and properly, and he's fierce. So when we look at this particular situation, Rudy Giuliani called to testify last week. We have no idea, nor should we have any idea in a secret proceeding what he said or if he took the Fifth Amendment at any point in time. This week, Lindsey Graham is set to testify on Tuesday unless the 11th Circuit issues a stay and buys into his argument that his phone calls involving this election in 2020 and the results, when he wanted, allegedly, to say that they should look into the mail-in ballots, and perhaps there were many of the mail-in ballots that had faulty signatures, and his communications with Donald Trump would be the focus of this particular special grand jury, and that he wants to say, well, no, that was within my duties within the speech and debate clause. We're going to see what the 11th Circuit has to say about that, but I expect Lindsey Graham is going to have to testify. This grand jury is investigative only. They can issue a report that would tell the district attorney at a later point in time whether or not she does have reason to indict, probable cause to indict any of the players, including Donald Trump.
And David Laufman, in terms of the operation at Mar-a-Lago, at this point, how concerned should any current or former staff of the former president there be concerned about legal exposure?
Well, I think any individuals who were involved in removing classified information from the White House in the waning moments of the Trump administration, taking them to Mar-a-Lago, knowingly keeping them there in a place they're not authorized to be, has potential criminal jeopardy, depending on all the facts and circumstances that the investigation uncovers. One of the statutes referenced in the search warrant is the Espionage Act, and at issue in principle is a provision that makes it a crime to willfully retain national defense information. And the fact that these were highly classified documents, as high as top secret code word, makes it pretty clear to me the president has potential jeopardy here, compounded by what appear to be deliberate misrepresentations by the president or his team to the government about whether classified information remained at Mar-a-Lago, and hence the obstruction statute referenced in the search warrant.
Ricky, you've been at this for a long time, tracking legal cases of all sorts all across the country. Have you ever seen anyone facing more than a dozen legal, civil, congressional investigations at one time? And what is it like being an attorney for someone like that when they have competing, compounding legal concerns and interests?
I have never seen this many investigations happening all at the same time, some in greater stages, some in lesser stages. But if you are an attorney for Donald Trump, you are well advised to separate each one and decide where you're going to devote your energies. Donald Trump, it appears, has been hiring lawyers from different places, so one lawyer does not have all of the responsibility. But this is not a good time for Donald Trump, at least if he thinks that everything is coming in upon him. However, we also know that Donald Trump enjoys the chaos. And we will see what happens in terms of his decision if he is going to run or not in 2024.
We sure will. Ricky Klieman, CBS News legal analyst, David Laufman, former Justice Department official. Thank you both for being here, and we'll be right back. We want to turn now to Campaign 22. Our Robert Costa is on the campaign trail in Atlanta this morning, and the editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report, Amy Walter, good friend of Face the Nation, is also here with us. Good morning to both of you. Amy, I want to start with you and something that the White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, said this week about the current state of the presidency and the Democratic Party. Take a listen.
We now have a presidency where the president has delivered the largest economic recovery plan since Roosevelt, the largest infrastructure plan since Eisenhower, the most judges confirmed since Kennedy, the second largest health care bill since Johnson, and the largest climate change bill in history.
And according to Politico, he went on to say, quote, the first time we've done gun control since President Clinton was here, the first time ever an African-American woman's been put on the Supreme Court. I think it's a record to take to the American people, he says. Are Democrats right now sitting in a pretty good position because of the issues in the environment, or does it have something to do with the candidates that they're running in these key races across the country?
So Democrats are clearly in a much better place they were than when we were talking about things in August of last year, right? So certainly beyond just the accomplishments for the White House, we also have lower gas prices. And so we're getting a little bit of relief, at least when it comes to cost of living issues, which is going to be important for the midterms. To me, the big change as well has been that the focus, instead of being on problems that were happening, whether it was Democrats unable to get big pieces of legislation done, or on the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which obviously was chaotic, or on the fact that inflation was biting a lot of folks. Instead, what is the focus been on? It's been on January 6th. It's been on what's happening at Mar-a-Lago. It's been on competitive Republican primaries that have talked a lot about Donald Trump and election denial. And so the camera, so to speak, the media focus has been on, and on abortion as well, all the things that are not great for Republicans. Now let's translate that into the campaign to come. Republicans say, that's okay. We had difficult primaries. The focus has not been on the issues we want to talk about. It's been on things Democrats want to talk about. We're going to refocus back onto inflation, the economy, and Biden. Those things will help us win. But pivoting to those issues as candidates who have taken position, are candidates who've taken positions on election denial, on Donald Trump, on abortion that are outside the mainstream. So Republicans now have to pivot to the center. Democrats are going to do everything they can to make that hard for them to do.
And to that point, Bob, let's listen to something that Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had to say about the state of Senate races back in April.
It's a perfect storm of problems for the Democrats. And how could you screw this up? It's actually possible. And we've had some experience with that in the past.
And to Amy's point, Bob, they may be having it right now with these candidates that are struggling to get back to the center and talk about other issues of bigger concern. What are you hearing from Republican sources regarding the state of these campaigns and the worry they may have about whether they can land the plane in November?
When I was up at Capitol Hill in recent weeks talking to Republican aides, Republican senators, they kept talking about 2010 and the ghosts of 2010. That was the year there was a Tea Party wave, conservatives on the march in many parts of the country, but Republicans disappointed in the Senate race. You might remember some names like Christine O'Donnell, who failed in her Senate bid in Delaware. Ken Buck failed in his Senate bid in Colorado, though he later got elected to the House. Republicans worry that though they have a pretty good shot, they feel, in the House, the Senate, because of candidates like Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, J.D. Vance in Ohio, who are not necessarily catching fire, that could not bode well for the midterms this fall, especially with the Senate.
There's another round of primary contests, Amy, Tuesday night in New York and in Florida that may give us a sense of the scope and the size of the majority Republicans could enjoy in the House going forward. But what else should we be watching for in those contests?
Looking at, actually, there's a special election also taking place in New York. Hudson Valley, this is an open seat Democrats hold. Biden won it by just 2 points. These are the kinds of seats that Republicans are going to need to win if they want to have a big wave, if we're looking at a big wave. And the two issues that we're hearing about, abortion and inflation.
Hudson Valley's in the 518 area code where I'm from, so I call that God's country.
Okay,
by the
very
way.
good. Very good.
Bob, real quick, we noticed this past week, former Vice President Mike Pence did something that usually a presidential candidate does. They went to St. Anselm College in New Hampshire. They went to the Iowa State Fair with Chuck Grassley. And I think we have a picture of this. He even sent flowers to Chuck Grassley's wife. What is up with the former president? What would be his path forward? And does he really have a theory of the case to make at this point?
Whether it's former Vice President Mike Pence or Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, there's a galaxy of Republican contenders, possible contenders, who are looking at 2024 and calculating what does it look like if Trump runs? What does it look like if Trump doesn't run? And at this point, no one's entirely sure. They believe the former president, based on their own conversations, and our reporting backs this up, is looking hard at a race, possibly an announcement later this summer, this fall, toward the winter. But if he doesn't get in for some reason, they want to be ready. That's why Pence is in Iowa, in New Hampshire. He wants to have the relationships with people like Grassley, so if the dynamics change in any way, he can jump in and have a foundation, having tried to rehabilitate himself with the Trump voter, with his book coming out this fall, and some of these visits. But at this point, there's a lot of uncertainty, too. When I talk to top Republicans in this country, they don't know where these investigations are going. I'm heading to Palm Beach this week. You have the affidavit battle down there between the government and the Trump lawyers. Because of that uncertainty over the Trump investigations, so many Republicans are saying we at least need to start laying an informal groundwork for a possible run.
We will see. Robert Costa down in Atlanta, headed to Florida. Thank you. Amy Walter, the Cook Political Report. We thank you, as always. Great to see you. We'll have coverage of the Florida-New York primaries on the CBS News streaming network Tuesday night, and we'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Margaret will be back next Sunday. For Margaret and all the hardworking folks at Face the Nation, I'm Ed O'Keefe.